Dude, I am telling you, if I have to go through another conversation or a discussion in which someone brings up team accomplishments to prove why individual players are better than others, I'm probably gonna scream. How you guys doing? It's July 16th, 2020 here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this piece for this episode of The Elite, I was really going to kind of get into a talking point that I'm kind of a little bit passionate about. So, of course, as a professional athlete, your goal at the end of each season is to end up being the last man standing. Either in an individual sport, you're the last individual player playing, you're the individual that wins it, and you have your team that helps you, of course, naturally, but all that credit goes to you. Or you're a part of or if you're on a team sport, you are a member of the team that wins the championship. Because it's the organization that wins the championship, it's not the players. So of course, the team is the team in the franchise is granted the title, even though there are some players that deserve a lot more credit than others, for certain championships. I don't think you can use individual accolades in a team sport unless a person individually, single-handedly, without a member of their team, wins the Like, one person shouldn't get all the credit for a championship unless they do it themselves, or at least 50% of the credit, because it's still a team sport. For instance, let me go back. Even in sports where it's just even when it's like single or individual sports, like say Simone Biles, Michael Phelps, Serena Williams, Roger Federer. In those individual sports where individual athletes are competing against one another in a one-on-one competition and you're playing in a tournament to get to the end, at that point, you can start counting championships and you can start counting grand slams. Like, for instance, Tiger. Like, you count all of Tiger's awards knowing that he has a caddy and everyone else that helps him get to who he is. But at the end of the day, he is the only one competing under his name. And at the end of the day, he wins more times than others. So that conversation for individual athlete sports is a lot different than that of a team sport. Now, as I transition to team sport, I can really go about this with every single sport, giving examples. But I want to preface this by saying there are instances in which there are team sports, and there are instances in which the best individual player is the last one standing, and those are the sports that call for such. And then there are team sports where it's the best team remaining. No matter what, at the very end, every single member of that team wins the championship because they were on the team that won the championship. Now, as I transition into the team sport side of that, like I said, I will start this by saying, of course, I recognize that some players deserve more recognition for others when it comes to championship teams, championship dynasties, regardless. I know. I'm literally doing a show about elite individual athletes that once on a team can make them title contenders. Yes, I'm aware of that. I understand the hypocrisy, what could be mistaken as the hypocrisy that comes to my mouth, but I want to be clear that I'm aware of that. But let's say if we transition to a sport like baseball. That's the easiest one to transition to, because in baseball, every single individual player can be selfish. At the end of the day, you just have to play the best defense for your position. And when you're up and when you hit, you want to hit a home run every single time. You want to try to make it on base every single time. So in baseball, you can't be selfish. But at the same time, it's so spaced out that every single position does their own thing. But at the end of the day, if you have Mike Trout on the Los Angeles Angels and the Los Angeles Angels aren't pulling their weight, Mike Trout's never going to get a championship. And you can't hold not winning a championship up until now against Mike Trout because of the team that he was drafted into and the organization that he's currently in. At the end of the day, it's a team sport. Whereas when you're talking about players, I think it boosts their resume. Like, for instance, in seasons where like Mookie Betts or like Chris Bryant will win the season MVP and then win the World Series, that definitely adds clout to your resume, and it definitely adds to the case that you're an elite athlete. But that shouldn't take away from the team actually winning. I think it should go to the extent that Mookie Betts and Chris Bryant should be like they should be recognized for winning championships and MVPs like in the same season, right? But that should just add to their resume. It shouldn't take away from the other Red Sox. You can't say Chris Bryant put the team on his back because Anthony Rizzo was there. They still had John Lester. They had all these dudes pitching. No, pitching, having elite pitching performances to get the Cubs in that position in the first place is not one position. Baseball, it's easier to understand because, of course, there are all-time greats in baseball that don't win championships, and then they'll be put against, like, for instance, at the end of the day, at the end of his career, Mike Trout might win one championship. At the end of the day, he's always going to be put up against someone that played for the Yankees that has 8 championships, and for me, I feel like that argument makes no sense because if we're talking about the individual player, especially if we're talking about championships, which is a team accolade in a team sport. At that point, the argument like it carries weight, but not as much as you think. I don't think it's like or even if we transition to a sport like say football, right, where you have 11 players on the field at one time, each doing their role to help the team win, and of course you have the bench. You have a whole roster of 53, including the coaches. In a sport where you literally have to select the play you need to either push the ball further down the field or to stop the other side from moving. So it's an 11-man team. And of course, there are Pro Bowlers, there are all NFL players that are scattered amongst the teams. And if a team wins, there will more than likely be a best player, one of the main reasons they got there. Like for instance, Tom Brady is an all-time great, probably the greatest football player ever because he has 6 championships. But if you're comparing him to other players, if you're comparing him to players from different eras, like, say, a John Elway, a Joe Montana, a Dan Marino, I think it's fair to give you the full picture. It's like Tom Brady was amazing, and he won 6 Super Bowls and lost 2. This dude dominated the AFC playoffs every year to the point where we basically expected the Patriots to make it to at least the AFC championship every year. Got it. But at the same time, Tom Brady was behind 5 linemen, usually he didn't have as good of wide receiver and running back talent as other quarterbacks, which is fair, but that shouldn't take away from their credit as well. But they played in a very weak AFC East, which gave them a couple more wins than some over others. I'm not taking away from Tom Brady or the Patriots, but if you take a look back, I mean, with the coaching, the players, the coordinators, everything together made the Patriots an unstoppable team on the offense and defense. And yes, Tom Brady as one player, if you could point to one player where most of this production comes from, yes, it's Tom Brady. But until Tom Brady goes out there, one against an 11-man squad, throws every single touchdown to himself, runs it in the end zone, stops an 11-man offense on defense by himself, snaps the ball to himself, kicks every single PAT and every single field goal, then you can give Tom Brady the credit for all, like the 100% credit for all of those championships. Then you can compare him like, Tom Brady won 6 championships to his name, and that should bolster his legacy. But I don't think you should use that when trying to compare him to someone else because team situations are always different. Not everyone is in the same. Not everyone can be drafted into an organization that's so well run like the New England Patriots, and that's kind of my deal. Or for instance, let's say, I don't know, some people would argue that if Dan Marino was on a different team, the circumstances would be a lot different. I mean, he played in Miami, and some people are arguing that he was a 5,000-yard quarterback in a 3,000-yard passing league. So I mean, that's who he was. Many people could argue if you put him in a different time, on a different team, in a different place, the situation might be better because at the end of the day, a lot of times you'll have the best player on the best team, but every single season ends with the best team on top as the champion. That's how team sports work. So you can't attribute individual accolades. You can't attribute team accolades to individual players to try to really get your point across. And then let's say I haven't moved from baseball to football to basketball, right? A more intimate sport where it's 5-on-5 and each individual player has more of a chance of determining whether a team loses or not. And until I see one individual basketball player go up against a 5-man team with a bench and everything for a 48-minute season, all the way from the beginning of the regular season through the playoffs, you cannot attribute a championship to one individual at all. You can say, oh, Mike won 6 rings. Scottie won it with them too. LeBron beat the Warriors. Kyrie averaged 35 and 40. And that team still they still had to score the points that they did. And they still had to stop the Warriors when they needed to for them to win that championship. And that's probably my example of like the championship that was most impacted by one player. The championship final series that was impacted by one player was when LeBron led all players in points, rebounds, and assists, steals, and blocks while being the MVP of the NBA Finals after beating a 73-win team. And even I don't say that's LeBron's chip. I acknowledge what Kyrie Irving has done on those championships. I acknowledge what even, Timofey Mozgov and Tristan Thompson have done. Even J.R. Smith. Like that, it was a team sport. And although the Cavs weren't as strong as every other team in the East, they were still the team that won. So, and at the end of the day, that championship was given to the Cleveland Cavaliers. The finals MVP was given to LeBron. Everyone recognizes that LeBron did most of the heavy lifting. Obviously, that was LeBron's championship and the nail in the coffin that is, his greatness. Like that was the nail that cemented, that was the nail in the coffin. Like that he's as of that moment, he's officially one of the greatest players of all time. Of course, just through that series alone. But you still can't take the credit away from his team. And with other players, Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and James Worthy won championships in LA, but they had 9 other players on that roster and a Hall of Fame coach. So, I could really go on with this for a very, very long time, but kind of just to kind of backtrack and cover back what I said. Even the individual players, like Tiger has a caddy, Simone Biles has. I would imagine Simone Biles is the best trainer in the world. So, she's not doing it by herself. And, of course, she's the one that's out there performing naturally. And they should get the credit for their championships. But it's just like, if you step back and instead of, focusing on the individual and stepping back and seeing the whole picture, you can see that, even giving athletes full credit for what they've accomplished themselves, even they would tell you themselves that they didn't do it themselves. They didn't get there themselves. That's why I think I don't know. I think it's kind of whack when people just ignore the fact that individuals were on teams when they won, and that's the reality of the situation. Because there's 30 teams and only one can be a winner in all these sports. Not every single great person that comes through sports can end up with a championship, and that's the reality of the situation. It's a numbers game. And I think, of course, the exceptional are the ones that actually do pull it off naturally, but usually they're a part of a team, and you have to acknowledge the team for a team accomplishment like winning a championship in a professional league. The team, that's kind of where I stand on this. I am a little bit passionate. That's why I got really, really long, but I appreciate you for not just hearing me out, giving me 13 minutes of your time. Just to you can completely take this with a grain of salt, or you can hopefully I did something to change how you how you're listening, how you view team sports and individual or team accolades in team sports. Of course, my views on this may possibly change. But if anyone's listening to this, they have any questions, or if they feel differently about it, of course, I'm open to that conversation. But to me, I feel like you're taking away you're taking away all the hard work that every other player does. Because of course the star player is in the spotlight. He's in the sun. He's in the light. They are the main reason they won the championship. Everybody knows that. But you can't attribute full championships to them because it's a team effort. Michael Jordan was the most dominant player in the 80s and 90s by far. But the Bulls were the most dominant team in the 90s by far as well. They still had a great team. Tom Brady might be the most dominant quarterback of my lifetime. But at the same time, the Patriots were the most dominant team in my lifetime. And the greatest coach of my lifetime happened to coach for the Patriots. So it's rare in instances in which a player way better than his team, a dominant player on a not so dominant team wins a championship. It happens, but rarely, because usually it's the best team that wins. So with that, I really hope all is well in this quarantine. I wish you all well. I'm just gonna sign off saying peace.